Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Soap or Nope. In this episode, I am going to try to make soap out of baking soda. And I really do mean try because I am not sure if this is going to work. So first I'm going to explain why it might work, and then I'm going to explain why it might not work. So why it might work, why I think it could work, is because soap is an alkali mixed with fat. Usually the alkali is something like sodium or potassium carbonate or sodium or potassium hydroxide. Baking soda, the chemical formula for that is sodium bicarbonate. It is in fact an alkali. So in principle, this is sounding like the kind of thing that we could use as a core ingredient in making soap. Now, that said, there's a couple of reasons why it certainly might not work. First, although baking soda is alkaline, it's not very alkaline. It only has a pH of about 9 compared to potassium carbonate's pH of 11. That might not sound like a big difference, but pH moves logarithmically, so potassium carbonate is actually about 100 times more basic than baking soda. The second reason is that every soap recipe I've ever read implies that your alkali has to be dissolved in water. It has to be a solution, not just a mixture. However, baking soda doesn't really dissolve in water. You can mix it around, but eventually it just settles out of the water entirely. So if it is important for the alkali to be fully dissolved in the water, then this won't work. Finally, there just could be other factors that I'm not aware of. People don't normally do this, and there might be reasons for that I don't know about. Yet again, I'm going for general concept, not precise measurements. I would say I started with about 2 liquid ounces of my baking soda mixture to a half a pound of lard, and that makes for my initial test a 4-to-1 ratio of alkaline mixture to fat. However, as the mixture continued to cook, it still seemed really oily. It didn't really seem like it was saponifying properly, and so I continued to mix in more and more of my baking soda mixture. I would estimate that in total I ended up using around 8 ounces of water and a 1/4 cup of baking soda. Towards the end, I also sprinkled in some table salt, which is supposed to give it a better, thicker texture, and it started thickening up quite a bit. And once that happened, I let it cool and cure for a week or so before pulling it out to test. So let's check it out. You can see that it does not smear around very easily. It doesn't feel like the soap I've made before. But eventually I was able to spread it over my hands. When I put water on, instantly it got a lot slipperier and even began to generate some suds. The texture is definitely off, and it is not very good soap. But, as far as I can tell, it is still soap. In retrospect, this makes me wonder 2 things about the process. First, how essential is it that the alkali is dissolved in water? And second, how essential is it that there be water in the first place? Every recipe I've ever seen calls for a solution of alkali, but unless I'm missing something big here, you don't need an alkali solution, just alkali and water, whether it's dissolved or not, because I just made soap with a mixture, not a solution. And maybe you don't even need water at all, you can do it just with a dry alkali and the fat. As I look at this picture that illustrates the saponification reaction, what it looks like to me is that if you don't have water, if you have a decreased amount of hydrogen and oxygen in the reaction, then what you'll just end up with is less glycerin. You'll still end up with just as much soap. If I am right that the only difference between the 2 soaps, one with the dry alkali and the other with the alkali solution in water, is the amount of glycerin in the final soap, that would make a lot of sense. The main function of glycerin in soap is to act as a moisturizer. It pulls water out of the air and adds it to the soap, which improves its texture on the skin. So it's very possible that the reason that my baking soda soap has such an odd texture is because the water is, say, boiling off instead of going into the chemical reaction and turning into glycerin. That's mostly speculative on my part, though. The chemistry side of this is not really my forte. If you do happen to know something about this, I'd love to know in the comments below. So, one more successful soap adventure. You can, in fact, as far as I can tell, make soap out of baking soda. And while we're here, I'd encourage you to take a second to appreciate how amazing soap really is. Imagine trying to wash your hands or your body without it. Soap is just so incredibly effective at pulling dirt, grease, and germs off of your skin, and we use it multiple times each day. Imagine not only trying to deal with dirt, but having to try to deal with germs and disease without liquid hand soap next to every sink. It's amazing stuff, and it's well worth taking a minute to be grateful for. Well, that's all for now. I've got some more soap projects planned, so stay tuned and stay clean. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.